Joint Task Force is a real-time strategy game released back in 2006. And looking at the reviews online, you'll notice a lot of mixed opinions, with game critics often giving the game negative scores versus regular gamers is usually giving it a positive one. You'll also sometimes find them referring to the game as a gem, claiming it's an unpopular game which deserves a lot more admiration. But when investigating the game, I was shocked by how little information on the game actually exists, and all the gameplay footage I found online just didn't look that fun. And so I wanted to play the game for myself and see if it really is an old forgotten gem which deserves more praise, or if nostalgia with its rose-tinted effect has distorted our vision for a game which was best left in the past. Alright man, so I want to mention early on in the video, I will be spoiling this game's storyline. I know I normally try to avoid spoilers in my videos, but I really want to talk about the story in this video, seeing as there isn't much information about the game online. And I'd like to help anyone else that found themselves in my shoes and quickly realize how little information about this game exists. But another reason I don't mind spoiling this game is because I doubt anybody will be playing this game for its storyline, because let me tell you, it's not very good. One big issue you'll find when looking into this game is you'll often run into the group this game is based on, the Joint Task Force. They were a real military organization created by the US Navy. They are known for carrying out international operations like we see in the game, and according to my limited research online, the Joint Task Force were not a very successful group, so the fact this game kind of glorifies them is pretty ironic. But back to the game, and one thing which you can't find online is how many missions the campaign has. You'd think it'd be a quick easy search away, but you'd be wrong, as at the time of me recording this video there is no way to know how long the Joint Task Force campaign actually is. The wiki does list all the locations you visit in the game, but doesn't give a number for how many missions there are per location. Even on the wiki there is a section for the storyline, but it's incomplete, only telling the story until the end of the Afghan/third story arc. You might think that looking for a walkthrough online exists, however after intense searching I could only find 2 YouTubers who showed footage of them passing the Somali/first story arc. One guy started his playthrough back in 2017, and after reaching the first Afghan mission, he stopped uploading Joint Task Force videos after that. The other walkthrough was made last year in 2023 by a man from Thailand, and at the time of me recording this video has returned to the game and just finished the Bosnian/second story arc, and might even finish the series before I release my video. There are of course others who have uploads of themselves playing through the game, however it's always extremely early game footage, and again these are the only 2 I could find that got past the Somali/first story arc. So you might find yourself wondering just how long is the Joint Task Force campaign? 20 missions. It's only 20 missions. And now that may not sound like a lot, but in this game it is, as all the missions will take at least 1 hour to complete. Some others may take 2 or more hours. The missions are stupidly long, but I'll talk more about that later. So the first 4 missions are in Somalia, the next 4 are in Bosnia, the next 4 in Afghanistan, the next 3 in Colombia, and the last 5 are in Iraq, totaling 20 missions overall. You can even see what mission and location you're up to based off your save file in the game. But whilst playing through the game, I had no idea when it was going to end. Even when I was completing the last mission, I didn't even know it was the last mission. I truly had no idea. The lack of information on this game is crazy. I even found a video on YouTube titled Joint Task Force Cutscenes, and it doesn't even have all the cutscenes in the game. It ends roughly at the start of the Afghanistan arc, and even then it's still missing some previous cutscenes, and it has less than 1,000 views at the time of me recording this video. In fact, trying to find reviews of this game on YouTube is also a struggle, and I actually might be one of the first, if not the first, to release a review of this game on YouTube. So before we get into the gameplay, let's talk about the story. So like I mentioned before, the game is based off the real Joint Task Force, who were an international organization mostly led by Americans, which this game actually reflects pretty well, seeing as the main character, Major Matthew O'Connell, is an American who takes orders from General Cleveland, who is also an American, and whilst playing through the game after certain missions, you can choose to recruit between 1 of 2 lieutenants, which allows for some strategy in the game, as you must pick which guy you'll have on your team. The difference between the 2 are their upgrades, which can be slow health regeneration, slowly repairing damaged vehicles, offering damage boosts to themselves and others around them, and sometimes there is no option and the game just offers you 1 guy to recruit. And usually these lieutenants are foreigners. For example, we have William de Berg, who is German and is a medic officer. We also have 2 Saint Bernard, who is French and is an engineer officer. Also Klaus Strutz, who is German and is a marksman officer. And the game also lazily reuses the same accents for all your other troops as well. Like how all the medic soldiers have German accents and all the marksman officers also have German accents.
Commandant? Ja? Yes, sir. Sniper ready. Commandant? Sniper ready. Sniper ready. Yes, sir. Ja? Ja?
Reporting for duty. Orders? Bones here. Orders? Yes, sir. No pressure, sir. Bones here. Bones here. Reporting for duty. Yes, sir.
And Douglas James, my pilot officer, who's from... Actually, I have no idea where this guy's supposed to be from.
That was a close one. Good to see you guys.
Also, the game will never let me use this guy except for at the start of the mission if we had a helicopter, which was only 2 missions in the whole game, mission 17 and 19. And keep in mind, I unlocked him at the end of mission 7, but whenever I tried to add him onto my team, he just wouldn't appear, which means I now had 1 less lieutenant. So I'd have to quit the game, go back, choose someone else, and relaunch the mission. Why couldn't the game have just warned me that I can't use him in these missions? But anyway, one primary objective you have throughout all missions is to keep your lieutenants alive. And if they die, you will fail your mission and you must reload one of your previous save files and try again. But these lieutenants that you pick from are able to die. The game even shows you this by giving them a green star as opposed to the important lieutenants who have a red star. And that's because these foreigners do not appear in the main storyline. Instead, all the good guy characters in the storyline are American. So if one of your foreign lieutenants die, they will not respawn. You can't use them again. And yeah, the game does do that kind of American military propaganda feel that was common around the time of its release, which is a little odd seeing as the game was made by a Hungarian game studio, but it's not unbearably patriotic. I also want to quickly mention the Hungarian developers for this game are called Most Wanted Entertainment, and even trying to find information on them is a challenge. But by the looks of things, Joint Task Force was one of their first released games and one of their most successful. So the campaign starts off in Somalia where a man named Akil Farah.
Akil Farah.
Sure. Anyway, he's the most powerful warlord in the country and has overthrown the government and has even been targeting minorities. So you follow the story of Major O'Connell, who has been assigned to the Joint Task Force and has been given his first mission from his superior, General Cleveland. And apparently O'Connell is glad to be back in Somalia, seeing as he helped aid Farah gain the power he currently has and wants to undo his wrongs. The game is vague on exactly what O'Connell did and it never really gets addressed. All we have is this flashback of him which appears at the end of the Somali story arc where he puts a hand grenade in some random Somali guy's mouth along with his old partner Brett Cortland, which I'll give to the game is actually a pretty cool feature seeing as we haven't been introduced to Cortland yet. In fact, he doesn't appear until we get to the Afghanistan arc, so I'll bring him back up when we get there. But right from the start, I knew that the story in this game was going to suck, as so much of it just looked dated and cliche. Anyway, Akil Farah is painted out to be this cartoonishly evil guy who oppresses minorities, he attacks humanitarian aid organizations and the UN, and in the past he worked with O'Connell to help bring about the Resources for Aid program, whatever that is, only to betray him and to rule the country for himself as a dictator. And that's fine, he can be this cartoonishly evil guy, who cares? But why go to all that effort to show he's nothing but a villain, only for Major O'Connell to receive orders he must kill Farah and he's upset? Why is he upset? Because he wants to preserve saving lives? Just doesn't feel right, especially when during this conversation he was using a machine gun and killing anyone within his line of vision.
He's history.
O'Connell, orders have changed. Apprehending Farah alive is no longer a priority. High Command wants him buried along with his regime.
Sir, I joined the JTF to leave that kind of work behind me.
Well, you didn't leave the chain of command behind you. I don't like this either, but you will carry out your orders. Cleveland out.
So that's how it feels to be one of the good guys.
If he's willing to point his gun and kill random goons, why does he all of a sudden care about some dictator who attacks humanitarian aid organizations and has committed genocide? I didn't have much hope for the story being good, but I remember after this point, I honestly lost all hope. After killing Farah, not much really happens. You don't even get a cutscene. The game just tells you to go to the evacuation point and leave, which didn't work for me for some reason. I spent so long trying to make it work, but the mission just wouldn't end for some reason. I even tried reloading the save file and killing all the surrounding enemies, even a few that respawned, and the mission still would not end. Worried I'd have to do the whole mission again from the start, I learned that you can use cheats in the game by simply typing in chat, and so by saying James Bond, the game ended and I moved on to the next mission. Not gonna lie, I did appreciate that, and I do like the fact that the game has cheats, although this was the one and only time I used them. Anyway, in the second Somali mission, you get introduced to Pepper Morgan, who is a hardcore journalist and is still somehow alive despite all her choice-making abilities, like filming the armed rebel Somali group, which leads to one of your soldiers getting killed. But it's somehow your fault, seeing as the armed rebel group don't shoot at journalists? Right, makes sense. So they'll shoot at humanitarian aid and UN members and commit genocide, but oh no, shooting at journalists? Now that's crossing the line. Anyway, the game makes a big deal about Pepper, claiming that she is highly respected by all the TV networks, and so long as we stay on her good side, we'll have the media represent us positively. And so throughout the game, you'll get these newsflash moments, giving you some context about your current mission, and you'll sometimes hear what the media think about the Joint Task Force, which is apparently so important the game won't let you fast forward whilst it's playing, but apparently not important enough to adjust the volume settings when the newsflash is playing.
Their deployment here is not a surprise. Somalia has been in turmoil since the brutal warlord and self-proclaimed President Akil Farah took control. Farah is suspected to have strong ties to global terrorism and is rumored to provide safe houses for terrorists in Mogadishu. We'll be back shortly with more updates as events unfold. Thank you.
Major, there are mortars and light artillery in your area, zeroing in on the refugee camp.
This is
Seek
Captain
and
Morgan,
destroy.
reporting live from Mogadishu
We cannot
Stadium.
afford any civilian
Tension
casualties.
is rising as warlord
Move out
Farah's militia
immediately.
increases its hostile activity.
But to give credit to the game, yeah, it does do a good job of the media slowly growing to favor the Joint Task Force, as they start off portraying you negatively and expecting the worst for you, but towards the end of the game they start glazing you and your accomplishments. But after completing the Somali story arc, Serbia has invaded Bosnia because they believe a terrorist group called the Meta are hiding and launching their attacks from within Bosnia, and seeing as the attacks have been targeting Serbia, they decide to invade Bosnia. Now this is the first time we get introduced to the Meta terrorist group, and all we've been told about them is they've committed violence beyond reason and have wiped out entire villages in Serbia. The game also gives you some lore before starting any missions, as General Cleveland gives a little debrief which thankfully the game lets you skip.
They claim to be fighting for the poor of the world, but
you can also get some more lore when playing through the game, as there will be conversations between the characters in the game. And at the start of the first Bosnia mission, General Cleveland claims that the Meta have made Al-Qaeda look like the YMCA. And I'm not gonna lie, that made me cringe. Like Al-Qaeda, the terrorist group known for 9/11, the world's most deadliest terrorist attack, look like pansies compared to the Meta. Like, I know he might be jokingly exaggerating, but this really made me roll my eyes and care less for the storyline. Like, don't just tell me the Meta are a big scary terrorist threat, show me, try to convince me of it. Again, very poor story mechanics from this game. And just in case anybody was wondering if the Meta were a real terrorist group, the answer is no. But yes, Serbia did invade Bosnia in the past, but it wasn't because of some terrorist group called the Meta. But back to the game, where the rogue Serbian general Arkon Dravovic was the head of the invasion, and this time Arkonald hopes to capture him alive, which you do this time, and you discover the Meta have a nuclear warhead, and that Russian oil tycoon / arms dealer Yuri Novikov looks like the guy in possession of it. But unfortunately the Meta realizes you're sus on him and decides to blow up his new oil tanker in hopes of killing him, but he manages to survive, and so you take him in for interrogation. From there he confirms he was in the possession of the nuclear warhead, but has since sold it to a Taliban clan leader named Khan Hamid. So you head to Afghanistan to stop him, only to find he's already dead, and the new clan's leader is now his younger brother Ahmed. But then he turns up dead due to lead poisoning. Wait a second. Ahmed? That's not a real name. They mean Ahmed? And how'd they both die? Anyway, after chatting with some random Russian pilot, you enter a cave where you discover Brett Cortland, who was Major O'Connell's old partner. He's a guy from the old Somali flashback, if you remember the one where they put the hand grenade in some guy's mouth. Anyway, we find him having a playful little conversation with some Afghan guy, and the two reunite, but seem to be on bad terms. O'Connell is sus of Cortland, but without any real reason, and so he just tags along and helps us on the mission for now. And we also get a beautifully lip-synced cutscene.
What the hell have you done? That man...
You know they never talk.
I know they always talk to you. And most of the time it was the last thing they ever did.
Whatever. Since when do you care anyway?
I always cared, Brett. I'm not like you.
That's touching.
Alright, so the lip sync in this cutscene is horrible. If you look closely, you can see the lip sync is actually resembling the words the characters are saying. The problem comes from the over-exaggeration O'Connell has when pronouncing the words. Your lips don't move that much when you're talking. Now, Cortland's does look a little better as his lips aren't as exaggerated, but it still looks off as he has this shadow in the middle of his lips, which doesn't reflect the actual lighting shown in the room. And because his lip sync isn't as exaggerated as O'Connell's, it just gives this unpolished weird feel to the overall cutscene. Alright, so the group make their way to the end of the cave and then they find the nuclear warhead. But then Cortland betrays the group and takes the warhead for himself and escapes. Afterwards we get a cutscene with O'Connell and the reporter Pepper Morgan where they have some conversation about why O'Connell does what he does. He doesn't really give an answer and it just feels like some lame attempt at the game to try to be deep and philosophical. Also in this cutscene, Pepper Morgan sounds like some Hungarian woman trying to do an American accent. Just have a listen.
Well, compared to the Detroit neighborhood I grew up in, it's pretty safe here, actually. I've been working the region for years now, and I've been assigned as the network's JTF expert. So I go where you go. Can I have a sip?
We also get some backstory on Pepper as we find out she's from Detroit, which is apparently safer than where we currently are. Keep in mind we are currently in Afghanistan, meaning she's claiming Afghanistan is safer than Detroit. Alright, if it already wasn't official before, it is now. This game's story is trash. Next we go to Colombia where large-scale drug operations are taking place and believed to be where the Meta are getting their money from. So you must track down the man behind it all named San Diego Vargas. So you stealthily land in Colombia only to get ambushed the second you arrive, leading you to believe that there is a mole within your ranks and an investigation is taking place to find the mole, so they fake your death, claiming that you died in the ambush. But us, the player, we already know who the mole is because they just showed us some cutscene of a British guy on the phone with Cortland. They talk about the warheads and the British guy tells Cortland to hit them hard.
Hit them hard.
Back with O'Connell and we managed to track down Vargas, but so did Cortland and he kills Lieutenant Oakley. Oh no, not Lieutenant Oakley. He's such an integral part of the story. How will we ever beat this game without him? Guys, this is so sad. I'm literally shaking and crying. So we managed to strike a deal with Vargas, who promises to help us so long as we complete a favor for him, which is to kill his rival drug dealer Miguel Ferreira. So we kill him and Vargas reveals that there is a second warhead and it's in Iraq. So that's where we go next. But turns out there is civil unrest in Iraq, so we claim to be entering for some peacekeeping missions, despite the fact that both the government and the civilians don't want us entering. How good. We are told Hamid Kamil is the guy to blame for everything, and so we go arrest him. Whilst in Iraq, we also try to secure the lives of some important higher-ups, and so we save some British guy named Thorn, who the player can probably assume is the mole, and they would be right, as he knows where the location of the warhead is, and leads us to it. Once we arrive, we find Cortland, who kinda just reveals everything to O'Connell, informing him of Thorn being the mole, and how Cortland is actually on our side, and even points us to the direction of the warheads. We then defend the warheads from oncoming enemies, and that's where the game ends. We even get one last cutscene with Pepper and O'Connell where Pepper claims Cortland has it all figured out, that the IPRS are to blame for everything. To be honest, the ending doesn't make much sense, and it even ends on a cliffhanger, but I guess we'll never know because they never released a sequel for this game, and I doubt they ever will. But I think we can all agree the story is trash. And if you're still not convinced, well, seeing as you now know the overarching story, let's go into it a little bit deeper and allow me to point out more inconsistencies I found within the story. One of the first flaws I noticed early on is the way the Somali people look. So as you may have known, Somalia is an African country, but the Somali people are an Afro-Asiatic people, not a Niger-Congo people like the majority of Africa. Despite that, the Somali in this game have flat noses with wide nostrils and look very Niger-Congo in this game, when in reality some may have this look, but the stereotypical Somali people have thin noses with small nostrils, making them look different from most other African countries. But this game doesn't accurately reflect that. Instead, they wrongfully depict the Somali as just any other Niger-Congo peoples. Something I know I brought up before was this cutscene which introduces us to Pepper, the news reporter. This cutscene is really dumb. We tell her to evacuate as the Joint Task Force are going around the area evacuating civilian personnel to the nearby refugee camp, and she tells us she doesn't want to be evacuated. She's fine. Only for one of your soldiers to die whilst trying to escort her. You then get blamed for his death from not only your general who tells you off, but also from Pepper Morgan who claims the terrorists don't shoot at journalists, and that we should have known that, which is outrageously stupid. Why on earth would they shoot at humanitarian aid groups and UN members but not at journalists? Humanitarian aid and UN members would be passive. They would be around the refugees and victims of the conflict, and they would try their best to avoid the terrorists as much as possible, whilst journalists would be trying to get information on the terrorists and would be having more interactions with the terrorists, yet for some reason they don't target journalists and only target humanitarian aid and UN members. That makes absolutely no sense. And a quick reminder, they also targeted and killed minority groups located within the country, meaning they literally committed genocide. And again, the fact that they didn't kill some random journalists who were just following them around is crazy. And again, the logic is also absent when O'Connell was the one blamed for getting the soldier killed, when it was clearly Pepper Morgan's fault for not agreeing to just evacuate in the first place. But still, Pepper Morgan and the general blame O'Connell for his death. And I know I brought this up before, but seriously, what accent did they give the pilot?
Oh, God, you showed up.
Which one of you is Cobra 11?
Me, sir. You just made the headlines back home. Looks like you've been collecting quite a few Purple Hearts. It is my specialty, sir.
Just lay low until we get the job done out here, promise.
Like, what the hell kind of accent was that supposed to be? Was that Gremlin? Was that supposed to be Gremlin? Because that sounded like Gremlin to me.
Breaking news. Spotlight on the battle in Krasnaya, the hometown of General Dragovich, where the rogue general is making a desperate last stand. Or is he? The general himself has just been interviewed by local media.
There are no JTF troops in Serbia at all. The media is telling lies. We have defeated the aggressors and have even captured some of their terrorist leaders. They will face justice by court-martial for their crimes against our people.
What about you being declared a terrorist by the president?
Nonsense. The president is the true terrorist, leading us to ruin by allowing Western aggression in our homeland. The people and the army are supporting him. They know that we have the right to defend ourselves.
Actually, he kind of sounds like rogue Serbian General Novikov. So maybe he's Serbian, but if that's the case, they did a terrible job at the Serbian accent, because that's not what they sound like. Also, another problem I know I kind of previously mentioned was Oakley's death. I know I kind of memed it, but Oakley's death is surprisingly weak. The cutscene where he dies is so anticlimactic. A part of me even wondered if he had actually died after watching it. But seeing as there is virtually no mention of him after the cutscene, I quickly forgot about him until I saw he was a playable character in the online multiplayer. But his death was very unimpactful, which just shows he wasn't a well-written or memorable character in any way. Before his death, he was just kinda always there and wasn't of much significance. He was definitely noticeable, but it was hard to form any strong opinions of him. In fact, the thing I remember most about him was his weak, anticlimactic death and the lack of acknowledgement after the fact. Actually, looking back, the story is pretty poorly told. Like, if you remember when Ahmed, who was the new leader of the Taliban and the previous leader's brother, and how he turns up dead due to lead poisoning, well, you only find this out by talking to some random Russian pilot who informs you of that. But seeing as the conversation happens during gameplay, I was too busy focused on the gameplay and didn't pick up on that detail. And so when we entered the cave in the next mission, you encounter Cortland, who was interrogating some random Afghan guy who during my first playthrough I assumed was Ahmed, and we even watch him die at the hands of Cortland, and so I assumed that this was Ahmed and this is where he had died. But after going back and rewatching all my gameplay footage, I now realize that Ahmed actually died from lead poisoning and that this character is actually just some random unnamed Afghan guy who Cortland is interrogating and later kills. But what's also strange is this character model is also used for Ahmed Doka, who is an Iraqi terrorist who suicide bombs himself during the Iraqi story arc. And the character model is also used for these Iraqi protesters in this cutscene as soon as you arrive in Iraq. And the character model is also used for Aziz, who is one of the playable characters in the online multiplayer. Who is Aziz, you might be wondering? Well, I was wondering the same thing after I had first finished the game, but now after going back and rewatching all my gameplay footage, I can now confirm Aziz is never mentioned in the entire campaign. In fact, out of all the 9 playable characters in the online multiplayer, Aziz is the only one who never appears in the entire campaign. Yet they used his exact same character model for so many random characters throughout the campaign. I have no idea why they thought this was a good idea. They could have named this character Khan Hamid or Ahmed after one of the Taliban leader brothers in the campaign, as they are never physically seen in the campaign, as that's what they did for Hamid Kamil, who was the antagonist in the Iraqi story arc. This character icon, which they gave him for the online multiplayer, never appears in the campaign. And so they could have just done the same thing for either of the Taliban leader brothers, or they could have easily just named him Ahmed Dorka, who is a minor character who appears in the campaign and is shown to have that exact character model. Also on that note, I know I kind of brought this up before, but Ahmed and Ahmed Dorka are not real Arabic names. Ahmed is, but Ahmed and Dorka are not. But I actually recognize these names as they're from the Team America World Police film released back in 2004, which was 2 years before the release of this game, The Joint Task Force. In the film, the main character named Gary Johnston goes undercover as a terrorist and uses the alias Ahmed to blend in. Meanwhile, Dorka is from the Indian song Tanak Tanak Tan by Della Mahindi. Sorry if I mispronounced any of that. But this was a classic Indian song which later saw worldwide appeal via it becoming a meme, but was also used in the Team America film as a regular word used in the everyday terrorist vocabulary.
Oh, shit. Come on, Gary. Act. You have the power.
Bak, Dirk Allah. Dirka, Muhammad Jihad. Oh, Dirka.
So why is an Indian word being used by Arabic terrorists from an Indian meme song, and why does he have a made-up Arabic name like Ahmed? Well, that's because the Team America film was, like I mentioned, a comedy film. You can even see this by the first scenes in the film where the Team America group spot a terrorist in Paris and decide to protect the city by accidentally destroying all their national monuments and doing more damage than the terrorist himself. They also base their humor off of poor American understanding of Middle Eastern cultures, as they use an Indian word like Durka and a false Arabic name like Ahmed. Meanwhile, the Joint Task Force game isn't a comedy game. In fact, it tries to be deep and philosophical at times, and so for them to officially name their characters things like Ahmed and Durka makes them ironically feel like the uneducated people that the Team America film was mocking in the first place, which was literally the film they took their inspiration from, and their poor understanding of the Middle East is put on full display within this game. If you remember, I stated that there are 20 overall missions, with 4 being in Somalia, Bosnia, Afghanistan, and so on. I even mentioned how you can see which mission and location you're up to by looking at the save file data. Yet mission 9, which is supposed to be the first mission in Afghanistan, takes place in the Caspian Sea. However, the Caspian Sea is not located in Afghanistan. Also, watch this news report and see if you can pick up on their mistake.
The Middle East. It's been about a week or so now since that daring prison break attempt in Afghanistan. 23 prisoners escaped, 13 of them known as Al-Matar operatives. They remain at large, and now, we are told, U.S. warships are gathering in the area near Yemen to try to help with the search for those escaped prisoners.
In this clip, the news report falsely claimed that Afghanistan is located in the Middle East. No, it's not. It's located in South Asia. A quick Google search could have told you that. I know some Westerners watching might shrug their shoulders and say, who cares? But to the people from this part of the world, these mistakes are obvious. It would be like playing a game from Middle Eastern developers, and in the game they state you'll be sent to Eastern Europe for your next mission. But really, your next mission mission takes place in Norway. As you may know, Norway is not located in Eastern Europe. I know some people might shrug their shoulders and just say who cares, they're all European anyway, and whilst you're not wrong, but to the people from this area or familiar with this area, it looks embarrassing to claim Norway is found in Eastern Europe. Also, this isn't the first time the news report have gotten things wrong. Watch this clip of them talk about rogue Serbian General Arkon Drovovic, but they instead falsely show an image of General Cleveland, who is supposed to be the top secret faceless mastermind behind the Joint Task Force organization, but instead here they are just casually showing his face on national television. Also, check out this clip where they claim Major O'Connell has recently been in the news spotlight for disparities in his service record.
Target eliminated!
Breaking news. Happening now in Colombia. The Joint Task Force has been dealt a severe blow in their struggle against global terrorism. The 1st Battalion, currently serving in Colombia, was almost completely annihilated in a brutal ambush yesterday. One of the supposed casualties is no other than Major O'Connell, the JTF's field commander, recently in the news spotlight due to disparities in his service record.
That doesn't make any sense. Disparities in his service record. Disparities means inconsistencies for those who don't know, which means that there are inconsistencies in his service record, which means that there are multiple conflicting accounts given about his service record which don't match up, which is wrong as there have never been multiple accounts given about his service record which don't match up. That statement is just false. Also, if you actually listen to the news, you will notice that he hasn't been in the news spotlight because of the disparities in his service record like the news claim. Instead, he's actually been in the news spotlight because of his leadership of the Joint Task Force and their attacks against the terrorist group called the Matar. Also, why did the news refer to them as Al Matar, but General Cleveland refers to them as the Matar?
Al Matar.
The matter!
You might be thinking that Cleveland is in the right, but his pronunciation for Arabic terms is usually pretty bad.
Akil Farah, Ahmad, Kuala Yangib Khan Hamad.
Kana Hamid.
Moving on. Seeing as the news just consistently get things wrong, I don't know which of the two is referring to the group correctly. If the group is indeed named El Matar, El is an Arabic word which means the. So El Matar means the Matar in Arabic. So if that's the case, then Matar should be an Arabic word, which it is actually. It means rain and is pronounced as Matar. So there could be an Arabic terrorist group named the Rain, which looking at other translator names for Arabic terrorist groups makes me doubt the group being of Arabic origin. Also, seeing as we versed the Matar in 4 different countries and only one of which speaks Arabic makes me add even more doubt. But looking at the lineup of countries and their languages, whilst I'm not too familiar with the languages of Afghanistan and Bosnia, I do know that Colombia speaks Spanish, and in Spanish they also use el for the word the. And whilst I'm not too familiar with the Spanish language, popping El Matar into Google Translates claims that El Matar means the killing in Spanish, so they might be of Spanish origin, but now I think about it, the Matar terrorist group actually makes no sense. So by what we know of them, they have committed violence beyond reason and wiped out entire villages in Serbia, and I'm not exactly sure why they did any of that, but they also might be getting their income from drug lords in Colombia whilst also trying to buy and sell nuclear warheads in Afghanistan and Iraq. Like, what the hell kind of group is this exactly, and how are they present in so many countries and conflicts, and like what are their aims and goals exactly? I have no idea, and I don't think the writers of this game had any idea either. The story just feels so rushed and uncared for. Like in our first Colombian mission, number 13, where we land in Colombia, we are told to go capture Santiago Vargas, and at the end of mission 13, we capture him and we hear him surrender.
We surrender!
But in our very next mission, number 14, we are told we have to try and find the location of Vargas, and at the end of mission 14, we find his residence and we get introduced to him in this cutscene where we agree to make a deal with him and to help him beat his rival drug lord Miguel Ferreira. Like, what the hell happened back in mission 13 where we captured him and we hear him shout, "We surrender"?
We
surrender!
Like, that is completely contradictory to what happens in the very next mission. Also, check out this cutscene which plays at the start of the Iraqi story arc. We are told that there is unrest unfolding, and we see a group of pissed off Iraqi men holding up signs in what looks to be Arabic and protesting. Now, if you couldn't tell by now, I actually learnt Arabic growing up. In fact, I knew Arabic before I learned to speak English, and so when I first saw this cutscene, I had a big smile on my face. Now, the cutscene did go by too fast in order for me to fully read what the sign had wrote, but after going back and rewatching all the footage, I was able to read this sign, which I couldn't believe they added in the game. I even put it through Google Translate just to be sure it said what I thought it did. Now, keep in mind, this guy is holding up a sign in a protest with other angry men, which reads, "In the afternoon, I like to spend time with my friends," with the words "spend time" highlighted. Yeah, I know, right? God have mercy. These guys have clearly been radicalized beyond any redemption. Such extreme beliefs, they have clearly been stripped of all their humanity. Now, there were also other signs shown in the protest, but it was difficult to make out exactly what they said. But by the looks of things, it looks just like gibberish. Like, look at this sign which has 3 letters, Dad, Ra, and Ain. Now, I could just tell you this word doesn't make sense, but I want to show you why. In Arabic, we read from right to left, and when there is a word, almost always the first letter is connected to the letter that comes before it. Kind of like writing in English, but in Arabic, the letters must be connected in order for it to be an actual word. Now look at this word, which starts off with the letter Dad, which is then followed by the letter Ra. The word should look like this, seeing as the Dad is followed by the Ra in that way, but on this sign it doesn't do that. Also, the Ra is followed by the Ain, which is also connected, making the word officially look like this. But the letters don't connect in that way. Instead, the letters connect down here for some reason, which is completely wrong. So this is just essentially 3 random letters on a sign, instead of it being one cohesive word like this, which, by the way, this word is gibberish. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't make any sense. This whole sign doesn't make any sense. This whole protest and cutscene don't make any sense. In the same cutscene, Cortland and the British mole named Thorn have this conversation where they make some vague references to the Iraqi war of 2003 and talk about them wanting a real war in Iraq, but never really stating why. Also, Cortland refers to this protest as peaceful, when in reality all these guys are pissed off and angry, and I'm pretty sure this guy throws a Molotov cocktail. Like, by what definition is this considered a peaceful protest? Also in Iraq, you have this cutscene where they said something different to what was written in the subtitles, or they just didn't say that line at all. Just have a listen.
Incoming hostiles, port side.
There it is! Go, go, go! Hot damn! More sand. Move fast and be aggressive. I don't want them to realize what's happening. Get your ass inside. We'll make the stand until they get here.
Soldier, what is this? It is imperative that we make it out safely.
We'll talk later.
Also, check out this mission where the weather was nice and clear until randomly when General Cleveland informs us of the satellite imagery being limited due to bad weather, then all of a sudden it starts pouring down rain. So we head to the camp in the north to try to fix the issue, but whilst doing that, the weather then all of a sudden changes back to nice and clear before I had even reached the north camp. Yet I'm still forced to complete the mission even though the problem should have fixed itself by now. And to be honest, there were so many other issues and flaws I found with the storyline, but I just couldn't be bothered to try lists anymore as this video is already long enough and I already talked about its biggest problems anyway. But really quick, check out this seagull that spawns from underneath the floor during my cutscene. So I think we can now all agree the story in this game is horrible. It's somehow simple, only presenting the lore through nothing but the cutscenes, conversations and news reports within the missions and debriefs before the missions. Yet it still manages to contradict itself, present false information multiple times, and manages to be confusing and difficult to follow along. But it's alright because the story is only half of the game. Games don't need good storylines just as long as they have good gameplay to make up for it. But unfortunately this game doesn't have good gameplay. Now to be honest, I haven't seen anyone online speak highly of the storyline, but I have seen people praise the gameplay. So this part of my video might be controversial to some people. And so I'd like to remind you that this is just my experience with the game, and I'm going to tell my honest opinion and try to help you you understand why I think and feel the way I do. Alright, so there are 3 game modes present in the game, being campaign, multiplayer, and tutorial. So I of course started off with the tutorial, which I believe gives a really accurate feel for the game, as it shows you almost all the mechanics the game has to offer, like how to select your group of soldiers, how to move them, how to attack the enemy, how to call for reinforcements, what type of reinforcements you can get, how some of those reinforcements operate in battle, and it really does cover almost all the options and mechanics the game has to offer. But the tutorial also does show the flaws of this game, as it sometimes feels rushed or unfinished, like in this part where it claims right click the tanker to fire, which is a lie. Right clicking the tanker does nothing. Left clicking the tanker is what attacks it, which is what I found out when I accidentally pressed it. The fact that this mistake is present in the tutorial is a really bad look for the overall game, as it gives this feeling of, if these mistakes are present in the tutorial, how's the rest of the game gonna play? And even now I wonder if making it left click to attack the tanker was a decision they made last minute, seeing as you use the right click for everything in this game, as you use it to select certain soldiers, to move them to specific locations, to attack a particular enemy, to select one of your lieutenants, to open the menu for reinforcements, to order the reinforcements. You use right click for everything in this game. The only thing you use left click for is to close your options menu. So for example, if you select a soldier and then change your mind, left click to close the soldier's little menu. Same goes for ordering reinforcements. Changed your mind, then left click and it will close the menu. Other than that, the left click is used for choosing a specific weapon on an enemy. So you must left click the weapon and then left click the enemy. That's it. Those are the only things the left click is used for. And I understand why left click is used to select the weapon, as right clicking the weapon allows you to let the AI use it or not. And so left clicking makes the AI attack a certain enemy. Makes sense. But why left click the enemy? I know it doesn't sound like much, but again, when everything else in this game is used to right click, why left click the enemy? I especially found myself in early game using the feature wondering why my soldiers weren't attacking the enemy, until I realized I had been right clicking the enemy, not left clicking it. But towards the end of the game, I had fully gotten used to it, but I could have picked it up a lot quicker had they used the right click and not the left click. Another issue I found in the tutorial was this mode, which the game claims allows you to manually control a specific vehicle, which would be really helpful in this game. But whenever I used this mode, nothing would happen. I think I pressed every button on my keyboard and nothing would happen. I even tried pressing control and all the other buttons and still nothing. I even tried right clicking like you normally would to move vehicles and again, nothing. Same with the left click. I could never get this system to work and I still don't know why. I even tried looking online to see if there was anyone else with the same issue as me, and of course I couldn't find anything, as there is a scarce amount of information about this game online. But after completing the tutorial, the game puts you back at the start menu, where you can see these black lines on the side of the game. I don't know why they left it like this. Like in the game, they have the whole screen used, but in the menu, they have these black bars. Why? They couldn't have just stretched it out. Couldn't have been that hard, right? But anyway, I saw there was only 2 things left in this game for me to do. One was the multiplayer, the other one was the campaign. And so I decided I'll complete the campaign before jumping into the multiplayer. And so I started the campaign, doing all the mandatory activities and all the optional activities, meaning I 100% completed this game. And so let me tell you my honest experience I had with the Joint Task Force game. So as you know, we start off in Somalia, with the first mission being pretty easy, as the game kind of holds your hand and instructs you on what to do, similar to the tutorial. In fact, it's actually about as long as the tutorial, making it the only mission I completed in less than an hour. After that, the real game begins, and from the second mission, the game has the same repetitive formula in every single mission, which is where you get a group of soldiers and military vehicles at your disposal from the start of the mission. The game will then tell you to enter a part of the map, kill all the enemies, and then move on and do the same thing in a different part of the map. As you progress in the mission, the map will expand, and you will gain more access to other areas, which you must go to and kill the groups of enemies in those areas. At the start of the mission, you'll be given objectives you must complete, and as you go about completing them, the game will give you money and more objectives you must complete in order to finish the mission. You'll also get optional objectives. When completed, do nothing other than reward you with more money. So why is money important? Well, like I mentioned before, at the start of the mission, you have a number of soldiers and vehicles, which are the only units you have for the whole mission. And seeing as these missions drag on for hours, each unit feels valuable, and I always found myself trying to keep as much of them alive as possible. Sometimes through the missions, the game might give you extra units, but you never know which missions these will be, and a lot of the missions don't give you any extra units. So when you're low on units, you can use your money, which you've earned throughout the missions by completing the objectives, to buy more units. You can buy more individual soldiers, or get a new vehicle, or order a helicopter, or even order a plane to come and bomb some area for you in order to help you progress throughout the mission. I did like how the game lets you save at any time, even in the middle of a battle. There is even an autosave option where the game will save for you every 2, 5, or 15 minutes. It's up to you, or you can turn it off. But I honestly really appreciated this feature. Of course, there were times I would manually save and then the game would autosave straight after, but oftentimes I would find the game would autosave at just the right moments when I left it on 5 minutes. Honestly, really happy with the saving system in the game. What I didn't expect though was how often I'd end up relying on the save system throughout the game. I personally try my best in every mission to keep as much as the original units alive, seeing as I would notice small losses would build up over time and I'd end up with a small group and finding it much harder to defeat the enemies. So I found myself using the same strategies in every mission to help keep my original units alive, which were things like putting on my soldiers in vehicles if there was any room, and then sending out the vehicles to go take out the enemies, and then once the vehicles were on low health, I'd then send them back to the repair vehicle. And I'd just keep doing that until the enemies had been defeated, and then I'd move on to the next area and do it all over again. I can't stress enough how that's just the majority of what you do in this game is. Use the vehicles to take out the enemies, then send them to the repair vehicle once their health is low, then after all the enemies have been defeated, just move on to the next area and do it all over again. Such extremely repetitive gameplay with limited strategy, as I found that was just the best strategy and the only one that worked for me, and so I just keep reusing it. Of course there was some small changes to the strategy along the way, but still very limited. Another strategy I discovered later in the game, which I started to use a lot more, was whenever I had enough money to buy a helicopter, I would use them instead of the tanks as they could fly, making them move so much faster. Plus, not all the enemies could attack the helicopters, and the ones that could didn't do that much damage, and so I'd just destroy all the enemies that could attack the helicopters, which tend to be pretty weak, then move on to strong enemies like the tanks, which couldn't attack the helicopters, allowing me to defeat the enemies so much faster. And whenever their health just got low, I'd just send them to the repair vehicle and keep abusing this new strategy. There were only 2 types of enemies that were difficult for me to face, one of which were these anti-aircraft vehicles, which as the name implies, were the only vehicles that were strong against the helicopters. But I found just using 2 helicopters or just using the tanks this one time would be my solution, as they weren't so difficult. The second one was the enemy helicopters, but they weren't so bad as I just used my own anti-aircraft vehicle on them. And this is how I was able to finish every mission with so much money left over, except for this one mission where I kinda lost my sanity for a second. But this new helicopter strategy just made the game so much easier and enjoyable at times, but the gameplay just still felt so repetitive that I just wasn't having any fun. The new objectives just felt like the old objectives, and it just felt like nothing new would happen in this game. It was so unstimulating that I just found myself spending like an hour or 2, maybe even 3 on this game, just because I'd get so bored and find myself wanting to do anything else. And so much of this game just didn't make any sense, like how in every mission there was this objective that if I killed at least 10 civilians I would fail. Now whilst this may sound like an interesting obstacle, it wasn't, seeing as the only way to kill civilians was to actually go out of my way to target them. Like I'd have to select my units, then press attack, then press the civilians, and that was the only way I could kill them, as there was only one AoE attack, and because it cost money I only ever used it once, as I'd rather spend my money on tanks or even soldiers. There was also this artillery vehicle that uses AoE attacks, but I never found them to be useful as they never hit precisely where you want them to, and so I just never used them, so there was no way for me to accidentally kill a civilian. And even if I did, accidentally killing 10 of them is virtually impossible. Same thing applies to the media, as killing someone from the media or attacking their equipment would lead you to lose some money, which again is a cool concept, except there is no way to accidentally harm them, unless you go out of your way to attack them just like the civilians. In fact, throughout the whole game, I never once killed a civilian or attacked the media, and almost every time I failed a mission, it was because Major O'Connell or one of the other important lieutenants had died. So what is the penalty for dying? Well, the game just lets you reload whichever previous save file you want. But I think one of the worst aspects about the gameplay has to be the AI. The AI in this game is horrible and completely unreliable, and because of its poor design, you are forced to micromanage virtually everything in this game, as the AI cannot be trusted to complete the simplest of tasks. Surely you can only rely on it to go in a straight line, and that's it. The pathfinding is horrible. I constantly found myself having to correct the units as it struggled to follow even the simplest of paths, and if the units get lost during its path, it would just give up. So many times I found my units having been left behind as they can't perform the tasks because of its crap pathfinding, and so I'd have to manually move each unit inch by inch to the spot I wanted them to go, only moving them in straight lines as that's all I could trust them to perform. I really can't stress enough how annoying it is to control every single unit, gradually moving them to the desired destination because the AI is too incompetent to complete the task itself. Also, the AI will always attack the first unit it sees, which is what makes the game feel so difficult, as I'd always find the best strategy would be to have all my units attack one of the enemy units together and then have them all attack and destroy each unit together. But because the AI would always attack the first target it sees, this would allow them to attack whichever unit they saw first. But when I commanded my units to attack a particular enemy unit, they would until the enemy was dead, and then they would go back to attacking whichever enemy they wanted. Meanwhile, the enemy units were all doing my strategy of focusing all their attacks on one unit at a time, and they would all attack my first unit that showed up, leading to me always getting completely frustrated at the AI and feeling like the game was more difficult than it needed to be. And every time I left the AI to its own devices, it was always the same case of having one unit who made it to the destination and is fighting all the enemy units alone, whilst the other tanks are off lost somewhere and had given up on trying to make it to the destination. It was so irritating that the AI could never be trusted. What's worse is later in the game, you'll start to fight enemies on two different parts of the map, which means you have to focus on two different battles going on at the same time. And if you leave one side alone thinking the AI will be able to defend itself, you'll quickly find your units destroyed as the AI is completely incompetent and unable to correctly function independently. So you will have to micromanage both fights at the same time. This had to be, for me personally, one of the worst moments in the game. I constantly found myself forcing the AI to attack the enemies one by one and retreat each unit anytime their health was low. I had such a hard time controlling both sides at the same time. And like, if you've been sitting there thinking to yourself, is the game really as boring as it looks? The answer is yes. That's why it took me so long to make this video, as I kept falling asleep whilst reviewing my gameplay footage, as most of the recorded footage I have in this game is just me micromanaging, as it feels like that's all you do in this game. I struggled so hard to try and make this long video filled with interesting on-screen footage for you guys. In fact, most of the gameplay footage you see on screen has actually been sped up because the game looks even more boring on its normal speed, if you can even believe that. But even sped up, this game still manages to look so uninteresting. Also, check out the end of this mission where I completed all the objectives, but the mission didn't end until they played this news report, which took a while to start. Also, why is this the most I can zoom out? The game lets you zoom extremely in. I don't even know why you would need to zoom this much in, but whenever I wanted to zoom out, I was always unsatisfied with how limited it was. And what's this crap that randomly covers the screen every now and then? I don't even know what triggers this or why it even happens, but it happened way too often than it should have. And why does the audio not play for the in-game conversations when the game is on 2x speed? Also, what's up with these random rockets that just come out of nowhere? I'd go to their location and find no enemies or vehicles. And what's up with these false instructions, like this optional objective that claims take out the supplies, cut the supplies to the artillery. If you blow up just one truck, the artillery is silenced. So I went and destroyed one of the trucks, then I continued to the main objective and destroyed the artillery just like the description told me, only to find I had failed the optional objective. And so when I reloaded the file and sent my helicopters to where the supply trucks were spawning from and left the game on fast forward to see what would happen, and after destroying several of the trucks that spawned, the game had claimed I had completed the optional objective. Bro, what the hell? So if the game wanted me to destroy all the trucks that the game game spawns, then why tell me in the description of the objective that if I blow up one truck, the artillery is silenced? Don't tell me that. Instead, tell me I need to destroy all the trucks in order to silence the artillery. You know, I almost didn't finish this game. When I was playing through the first arc in Somalia, the game wasn't that fun, but it wasn't horrible either. But when I reached Bosnia, the game's difficulty changed so much. Honestly, if I wasn't playing the game for this video and I was just recommended this game from some friend, I definitely would have dropped this game back in the Bosnian arc. I truly don't know why they made this arc the most difficult arc in the game. For some reason, the Bosnian arc has the longest missions with the most difficult objectives. And being so early on in the game made this arc so horrible to play, as I was still an inexperienced player. And to add to my stress, I didn't know how many missions there were in the game overall. So when I was playing through the Bosnian arc, I kept thinking to myself that there were two options, which was 1, the game is getting really difficult because I'm close to the end of the game and the game was just surprisingly short, or 2, the game will continue and the missions are going to get harder than how they currently are. And the more I progressed, the more I thought the second idea would be true, which is what really made me want to quit. Little did I know my second prediction was only half correct, as the game would continue, but as soon as we got into the Afghanistan arc, it was surprisingly easier. But I assume this was only because it was the beginning of a new arc. But to my surprise, the difficulty never reached the same as it did back in Bosnia. I was so confused by this, and even after fully completing the game, I still feel as if Bosnia was the most difficult arc in the game. I tried to see if anyone else online agreed with me, and of course I couldn't find anything as there is a scarce amount of information about this game online. The Bosnian arc being the most difficult arc is horrible for this game, as it's so early on in the game. It's literally the second arc of the game. It's where players are still learning and trying to get a good feel for the game. So when the Bosnian arc is as miserable as it is, it really discourages new players from wanting to play anymore, making them want to quit early on. I know I definitely felt this way. And as you already know, the storyline was definitely not good enough to make me want to stick around. The last 3 arcs, Afghanistan, Colombia, and Iraq, more or less feel the same, but because of the repetitive nature of the game and the horrible AI, the game really doesn't feel worth it. There were some noticeable missions that stood out and did something different, like the first and last Afghanistan missions where you are at some oil station and must reach some boats, or in a cave and are made to reach the end. These are the only missions where you don't heavily rely on tanks, and so my usual strategy that I abused throughout the game of sending in tanks and then relying on the repair vehicle went out the window, and I actually had to come up with real strategies, like how I only had a few medics who could heal the group and they couldn't self-regenerate like my repair vehicle could, except for my medic lieutenant who had slow health regeneration, but I did have to earn him that upgrade and he was the only medic with that ability, so it didn't feel cheap. But these were the only missions I actually enjoyed playing, as I didn't have to heavily rely on the tanks, which were the vehicles with the horrible pathfinding, as the soldiers and the helicopters also had horrible pathfinding, but it wasn't as bad as the tanks. And I actually had to think about my next moves and how I was going to approach each enemy. Like when I noticed there were tanks and I had to defeat them, I thought about which soldiers I could send out and who I was able to lose and who I wanted to keep alive. I tried to position my units in locations I thought would work best in my favor. These were the only missions I actually enjoyed, as it felt like there was a new change in pace, and now the game felt as if it had some real strategy to it. And this is where I felt like the game excels, where you have a small group to control and are presented with different scenarios which require different strategies, and I couldn't just abuse the same one and just constantly rely on my repair vehicle to fix all my problems for me. Instead, I had to scout ahead and see what I'll face next, then plan out my next moves and how best to take out the enemies ahead. But sadly this refreshing take on the missions was only done in missions 9 and 12. And I guess also the first half of mission 14, but I don't know why I didn't really enjoy that one as much. The game also does kind of spice things up when it sends enemies to you instead of the usual you going to them. And I did notice that kind of made me think of different strategies I could perform, but it didn't really change much. But I did notice them doing that a lot more towards the very end of the game. The last mission is even between your units and all the enemies the game sends your way as you defend the nuclear warhead. And it was kind of weird to see the mission end and the general congratulate the major for all his hard work. Meanwhile, an enemy was literally destroying our defenses and was about to reach the nuclear warhead right before the mission had finished. But now I had 100% completed the game. Having done all the objectives, I finally thought now was the time to try out the multiplayer, which as you could guess, I didn't have high hopes for. I saw there were two types of multiplayer, the online one and the one with the CPU dubbed skirmishes. I tried the online multiplayer first and surprise surprise, no one joined my game. To be honest, I'm not shocked seeing as it's a very old game and not a very good one. I also checked to see how many people played this game on the regular, and according to the Steam charts, this game has an all-time peak of 19 plays, with only 2 players in the last 24 hours and in the last hour. Keep in mind, I am one of the 2 players in the last hour and 24 hours. I would say this game is dead, but I honestly don't think it was ever alive to begin with. This has to be some of the lowest records I have ever seen and will probably ever see on this channel. This also makes me question just how many people have actually beaten this game. I don't think very many, but I decided it's time to finally get this game done and over with. So I started up the last mode of this game, the skirmishes, which is the multiplayer against the CPU, and I was pleasantly surprised at how much fun I had with the skirmishes. First of all, you can pick between different characters, 9 overall, coming from the Joint Task Force, the Dictators, and the Terrorists, and each have their own upgrade tree, starting units, models, character dialogue, and models for their units such as soldiers and tanks. And they even have different prices for their units, as I noticed the terrorists usually have cheaper prices for the same units than the Joint Task Force characters, which is a really nice feature. Seeing as the skirmishes need at least 2 players and can have up to 8, the game lets you set teams, or you can have a free-for-all. When setting teams, you can have as many players as you want in each team, just as long as there are 2 teams, as you can have a 7-on-1 if you want, and you can even have members from the Joint Task Force on the same team as members from the dictator or terrorist side. You can even have everybody be the same character if you wanted. All you need is at least 2 teams, but you can have up to 4. You can distinguish who is who by the colors you pick before the match starts, and the game will show you who is on your team by marking them green in the mini-map, or they will appear red if they are on the enemy team. There are 3 default game modes, being Deathmatch, Domination, and Battle Royale. Or you can even set your own rules, making your own custom mode, which is really cool. Deathmatch is where you must kill every enemy soldier and have only your team alive in order to win. Domination is the exact same, except you can also win by just capturing all the flags on the map. And Battle Royale is where the map will continue to shrink, and if you get left behind, you will instantly die. And anything else that was left behind, like vehicles or flags, will disappear forever. Also, flags will appear in every map, as flags are what you use to gain money in the multiplayer. Money is used in the multiplayer the same way it is in the campaign. You use it to buy soldiers, vehicles, helicopters, etc. You can set how much money the vehicles will give you every second, but on default it's $4 a second. You can go as high as $8 a second and as low as $0. You can set how much money you have at the start, as well as all kinds of rules like enabling or disabling landing zone and Vietnam, which thankfully the game does tell you what the rules are if you hover over them, allowing you to create some pretty cool custom modes, like using the Armageddon rule, which after some time all vehicles will be destroyed and you cannot get new ones. Or sudden death, where all units will suddenly lose 90% of their health. I honestly really enjoyed tweaking the rules and creating my own custom modes to try, but the deathmatch and domination modes were really nice default ones I used to try out all the maps and characters. There is 15 maps, none of which are from the campaign, and seeing as there are 15, I feel like they did a really good job with them, seeing as they never felt samey and all had a unique feature or two which made them stand out, like how the maps Bosnian Railroad Station and Hell were smaller maps and the only two maps which didn't have radar trailers, which are used in the game to get tanks and artillery vehicles. So I personally didn't enjoy these maps, but I'm glad they exist. Also, side note, radar trailers in real life are these things you see on the road, but I don't know why in this game they are used to request military tanks and artillery vehicles. I don't know, maybe the military versions are different or something, but whilst I did appreciate every map, there were some I preferred over others. My personal favorites were a tropical island, which was a very large map, Bosnian village, which was split in half by a river, Iraq City, which looks kind of weird but I oddly enjoyed, Iraqi Front, which was probably my personal favorite. It was just a really nice default map. Somalian Airfield was another nice large map, and side note, they named it Somalian Airfield, which is wrong. They should have named it Somali Airfield, but whatever. I also didn't mind Arabian Fortress, Factory, Highland, Oasis, Tropical Paradise, and Volcanic Island. I also noticed there was a number next to each map, but I'm honestly not sure what purpose they serve. If I had to guess, I would say it's the recommended number of players for the map, but again, I'm honestly not sure. But I assume this because I tried to have 8 players in some of the smaller maps and the game would just not work. And when it comes to the characters, I know I kind of touched on it before, but there are 3 characters from the Joint Task Force, Dictators, and Terrorists, totaling in 9 playable characters, each with their own upgrades, starting units, and vehicle prices. But I always just found myself playing as Major O'Connell, as he's the main character you use for the whole campaign, and I had become very accustomed to his preset, so I just kept using him, and I also think he had the best upgrades and starting units out of all the characters, so there was no one else I considered after him. One feature I really liked about the matches were they never felt like they dragged on for too long, as I always felt like something urgent needed to be done. Also, if your chosen character dies in the multiplayer, you can always respawn your selected character at one of your captured flags. He will cost some money though, and you'll find yourself without any other units, but at least you're back in the game. And in case you're wondering, would your character still have the upgrades you gave him before he died? The answer is yes, but you'll find your respawn price will increase with the more upgrades you give him. One visual design I appreciated was having the flags rise and fall, showing you when they would change colors, and if you leave whilst it's changing, it will stay on its current spot on the pole. I also liked how the flag would change to the color of your tanks to show who had which flag, and if you were playing as a team, they had 4 custom flags for the 4 available teams. Team Alpha has an eagle, Team Bravo has a bear, Team Delta has a wolf, and Team Charlie has some kind of cockroach looking thing. Look, I don't know what that's supposed to be, but whether I was playing free-for-all or with teams, I was really enjoying the multiplayer, even when I was using tanks, despite the fact they still had the horrible pathfinding. And I think that's because, like I mentioned earlier, this game excels when you are controlling a small group, as it allows you to notice when the AI is resorting to its horrible pathfinding, and you are quickly able to adjust it. And yes, whilst you are micromanaging, because it's not an overly large group, it's not such a pain. In fact, it's actually kind of fun to micromanage a small group, as you can quickly switch up your strategies and you can see all the resources you have in front of you. And now it's just up to you to think on the fly and to rely on your problem solving skills. Like, I couldn't just fall back on my repair vehicle strategy, as sometimes my vehicles never made it back in time to be repaired, and I couldn't just reload the save file. I had to live with the consequences and be more careful next time. And just spending all my money on helicopters didn't work either, as the bot would usually have an anti-aircraft vehicle or 2, and after they ripped my helicopters to shreds, I had hardly any money left over. I actually enjoyed the multiplayer skirmishes. It finally challenged me. It forced me to think on my feet and prepare for the unexpected. And a lot of this is thanks to the companion and enemy AI, because it was surprisingly good. It never felt stupid or unfair. It always felt challenging and methodical, and every time I lost a battle, I found myself thinking, hold on, maybe if I try this strategy instead, maybe I can defeat it this time. And I was so encouraged to try again and to prove to myself I can beat the AI. I was honestly so surprised by how much I enjoyed simply playing against the AI and having the AI companion around to help me out as well. Probably the only thing I can fault the enemy AI on is whenever I increased the difficulty for the Battle Royale mode, which made the map shrink faster, I noticed the AI was always more concerned with trying to kill me than it was trying to keep itself alive, which I suppose it's probably just programmed to kill you and nothing more, which fair enough I guess. But because of this, the AI felt ferocious as it was hell-bent on trying its very best to kill you, and it didn't hold back. And that's why every win felt so earned, and every loss made me feel as if maybe if I just switched up my strategy or done things a little differently, I could have gotten that win. And so I would go back and try again. And when I finally did get that win, it felt earned because I relied on my quick thinking and strategy making skills and didn't just abuse the same formulaic strategy I had throughout the campaign. And even one of the best compliments I can give a game, which is after I had recorded all the footage I needed for this game, I still went back and played more of the multiplayer unrecorded just because I wanted to tweak a rule or two or try beat the AI just one more time. And so when I look back at these old reviews from the game critics and the regular gamers, I finally understand them now. The game critics played through the campaign, hated it and abandoned it, whilst the regular gamers played through the multiplayer and after a while understood the complexities of the game and fell in love. But I think my overall experience aligns more with the game critics, as I too had to suffer through the whole campaign. And to be honest, the campaign is probably the better way to learn the mechanics of this game as opposed to just jumping into the multiplayer for the first time. And so the game feels like it's in this weird state of limbo where you should play through the campaign in order to better understand its mechanics, but you will hate the game in doing so. But once you've completed the campaign, you then enjoy it by versing the AI or your friends in the multiplayer, as the game has long been abandoned by other humans. And so because of that, I can't recommend this game. Again, even thinking back to those missions in Bosnia, I really didn't enjoy playing through those mind-numbing bad campaign missions. And so it was a hard game for me to score, but I think I'm happy giving Joint Task Force a 5.5 out of 10, with a heavy lean towards the 5. So officially giving Joint Task Force a 5.5 out of 10. And seeing how much I didn't enjoy this game, I will award it with the worst game I've ever played on this channel award. How good. Alright man, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed, and yeah man, take care.